pros and cons of Ukraine's visa-free regime, vision of EU members. We'll meet Iryna Sushko, Europe Without Barriers, and Iryna Savchenko, NGO Europe Without Barriers as well. Please have the floor. Good morning, everyone, first of all. Since the visa-free regime is getting closer, as we can see from the latest events in the parliament, to the completion, and we are talking first of all about technical implementation of those tasks and criteria that are stipulated by the visa liberalization plan. Among those discussions, even battles, especially in the parliament, that we could observe, people forget to mention another component of this quite complicated visa liberalization process. We mean, first of all, political readiness of EU country members to support visa-free perspectives for Ukraine. I'd like to remind you that first, EU institutions in the EU should be the European Commission, and as we can observe, this institution is the most optimistic organization amongst other institutions, and since these technical criteria and tasks originate from the European Commission, it's obvious that it is the very institution that will be interested in Ukraine's progress and Ukraine's implementation of all the tasks. It should get closer to European standards, but after the European Commission, who only comes up with its proposals on visa cancellation, we can look at the European Council and European Parliament to avoid this possible complicated procedure of approval, as we can hope of a positive decision of the European Commission. Now and much earlier, we should have thought about arguments, about grounds and substantiation, that should be provided by the Ukrainian party to both of these important institutions who take a final solution on the visa-free regime. What we can see in the international arena and in the European Union, we can observe certain hesitations and doubts. We would come across certain risks that can seriously question Ukraine's perspectives on visa-free regime. Europe Without Barriers, as you know, deals with freedom of mobility. We said that amongst the EU member countries, there were a group of those countries who supported visa-free perspective of Ukraine, those who were ready to understand challenges that are now faced by Ukraine. And first of all, we can mention increase of IDPs number and the conflict in the east of Ukraine that is not accomplished yet, and though insignificant, but just increasing number of people who are looking for a political asylum in EU country members. There's a certain group of the EU member countries who can doubt this perspective. What we can do as preventive actions today, apart from the very important technical basis implemented both by the Parliament and the government, I believe that the Ukrainian party should focus on diplomatic activities, on work with every EU member country, and to understand what type of information is missing for these countries, and to provide this information to ensure further readiness for support to a visa-free regime. During almost 3 months in the summer, Europe Without Barriers experts interviewed top officials of the European Union, representatives of the Interior Ministry, Internal Services, Immigration Services, and they questioned the opinion of independent experts. We will tell you about every representative. It was very difficult to get these answers. It turns out that the European Union and those institutions are rather closed for communication, for issuing this information even in the expert environment. We were mostly surprised by France. We asked it via the International Coalition of Europe for Visa-Free Regime to give an interview, at least on one of the issues. But France just rejected our request. It can be an evidence that France, in its practice of visa issuing to non-EU country citizens, remains rather complicated, and it is not ready to contact those countries. I'd like to pass the floor over to my colleague Iryna, who will tell you specifically what kind of answers we have received from dozens of EU countries. Good morning, colleagues. During our investigation, we interviewed top officials from the following countries: Poland, Lithuania, Slovak Republic, Hungary, Netherlands, Sweden, Italy, Germany, Czech Republic, and France. Concerning France, you have already heard the information, and I'd like to focus on the following issues. Having analyzed answers of the top officials of these specified countries, we have formed the following picture. There is a group of countries who sincerely lobby and support Ukraine during taking a solution for a visa-free regime. This group includes Slovak Republic, Lithuania, Hungary, and Poland. Other countries form the group that doesn't reject but will follow the European Commission recommendations. During the interview, the countries were suggested to answer a certain number of questions. The first unit touched upon assessment of migration risks from Ukraine. We analyzed their answers and we got a picture. If we compare migration threats from Ukraine, then against the background of the existing situation in Europe and flow of migrants from the Near East, those risks can be assessed as below average. In the unit of questions, assessment of implementation of tasks provided for by the Visa Liberalization Action Plan, all the countries were unanimous in saying that the issue remains within the anti-corruption unit and money laundering issue problems. Such country as Slovak Republic says that many reforms are hampered by the country's leadership. The next unit was in the influence of the military conflict upon the visa liberalization process. It was the most important aspect for us because, as in principle, some of the countries expressed their opinion. Then the fact of the military conflict could be used by politicians as a pretext to extend a positive voting for providing Ukraine with a visa-free regime. But most countries said that the final decision wouldn't be influenced by the military conflict fact, but amongst risks related to the conflict were the absence of the border between Ukraine and Russia and insufficient control of Ukraine in the contact line and the conflict area. Accompanying risks are seen as weapon smuggling and terrorists and separatists with the Ukrainian passports joining the European Union, going to the territory of the European Union. Those countries as the Netherlands and Sweden, who are far from us, but still they consider this threat. We analyzed the political will of the countries and we have generated the following picture. On the whole, support to Ukraine's to providing a visa-free regime to Ukraine. This issue exists and political will exists. But Poland, Italy, and Germany voiced an opinion that their countries have very powerful anti-Ukrainian propaganda, though. And our president, our State Security Service, our Minister of Foreign Affairs should increase Ukraine's positive image. Unfortunately, Russian propaganda is very powerful because they have very powerful resources and they use them for their benefit. So also, the countries have mentioned that while getting a positive decision from the European Commission, they will be ready to support Ukraine, though unfortunately the crisis with Near East migrants could be a possible effect upon extension of a positive of taking, upon prolongation, a period for taking a positive decision toward Ukraine. I'd like to add several words. What is important now, especially after yesterday's voting, the government will be talking concerning amendments to the labor law. We can say that almost all criteria have been fulfilled. We are an organization which monitors and controls this process, and we can say that not all the tasks have been fulfilled. Therefore, it's extremely important that we should be responsible and we should revise all the criteria to make revision and to accomplish the technical part of this process for the purpose that all the EU countries who have a certain skepticism and additional questions to us, they shouldn't have any grounds, any additional arguments that can let them say that you haven't met all the criteria. Of course, they can say, please, okay, you demonstrate a certain progress, but please accomplish your task. To avoid this, we should really accomplish this task. Thank you. Thank you. Now we are going to have a question-answer session. Are there any questions from journalists? Let me ask you several questions. First of all, I'm interested how you selected those 10 countries. How did you select those 10 countries? Why you mentioned these 10 countries and not all the country members of the European Union? The selection was based on the following principle. First of all, we selected the countries where Ukrainians traveled most frequently. Secondly, the fact that we already had preliminary analysis, and we knew that there were a group of countries who can be divided into skeptics and lobbyists, and or simply those who supported visa-free perspectives. Therefore, we concentrated upon these countries. And another problem is that many EU countries don't want to contact Ukrainian representatives. They just refuse to talk to us. And another important thing I wanted to mention. Regardless of our criticism, the government has made a big progress. But unfortunately, there is no time or resources or maybe clear planning that should be analyzed. Why the government cannot inform the Ukrainian society and the EU partners about all these things and tasks that have been already implemented. Because finally, those migration safety risks Ukraine is related with are very exaggerated, and those stereotype, even demonic fears and confirmations should be answered by arguments showing that not all, that everything isn't very scary, that Ukraine, regardless of all these challenges Ukraine is fighting with, Ukraine remains a country implementing its reforms. Thank you. The next issue, technical, and the next question is technical. All the numbers that you voiced, are they open online? And if it's so, then where can we find them? This information will be placed on our website, visa.org.ua, and also we can send this information, we can email this information to those who need it. And the final thing, the matter is that today's press conference is only the beginning of our big start, and we should have started our session with informing you that in early December, our team, representatives of Europe Without Barriers, we are going to travel to Brussels, and we will meet respective key stakeholders, specifically Quest and European Parliament, European Commission representatives. We will have interviews which will help us to have specialized sectoral discussions. We have prepared our expert vision on how we can close these issues emerging with skepticism in the EU countries, but and we have to try to answer them. But our opinion may not be enough, and we call the government and respective departments and agencies for joining this information campaign we are starting from Ukraine. And then our plans include travels to some EU countries, specifically Italy, the Netherlands, and other countries who have very many questions as to Ukraine's perspectives. And also not only in terms of the visa-free regime, but the association agreement as well. If you have no more questions, thank you, dear friends, for coming, and see you later. Dear colleagues, let me remind you that the final press briefing and the next will take place at 12:30. We will meet